As the oil disaster in the Gulf stretches into its 7th week, the White House is now saying the president supports removing caps on liability for oil companies engaged in offshore drilling. And BP, as you know, has said that it will pay all legitimate claims, but it could get a lot more complicated than that. There are a number of key players here in this disaster. Let's go through them for you. First of all, let's take BP. As you know, this company owns 65% of that Macondo well. And then you have other players here that you may not have heard of. Let's take a look at Anadarko. This is a large independent oil and gas producer. They have a 25% stake in that well. And then you have a Japanese company named Mitsui. They have a 10% stake. The key here, though, is that Anadarko and Mitsui are non-operating partners. They're just investors. And one of the analysts that we spoke with that covers these companies says the operator, BP, always has the ultimate authority. But Anadarko and Mitsui could foot some of this bill down the road. That's important. What's also important to note is that if there is gross negligence that is proven, there's room for Anadarko and Mitsui to sue BP for all the revenue they've lost as a result of the disaster, or at least block BP from asking them to pay for some of the costs. So far, as you know, BP has footed a bill of about $1.25 billion. But these aren't the only players. You need to know about 3 other very important companies in all of this. Let's start out with Transocean. This is the world's largest offshore driller. They insured the rig, their own rig, at $560 million, a very expensive endeavor. And also, they own this rig. They leased it to BP in 2008. Now, the expert that we talked to about Transocean said you can make the analogy to a car rental company. If you rent a car and crash it, don't blame the car rental company. He's saying the car rental company is like Transocean. And what actually Transocean is doing right now is that they filed a suit in federal court trying to invoke an 1851 maritime law that would limit their liability for personal injuries to less than $27 million. It'll be a judge that decides on that one in the end. Then we have this company. You've probably heard of Halliburton. Halliburton cemented the well, and they say they did it all to code. It was all done exactly right. They've denied any responsibility, and their CEO actually wrote this letter to Congress and said, "We do not share your assessment that Halliburton is among the companies that, quote, bears complete responsibility." That's Halliburton's stance. Finally, you have this company, Cameron International. They built that blowout preventer we've heard so much about, but it didn't work. After the explosion on the rig, Cameron's CEO told investors the company has a $500 million insurance policy that would cover any claims it may face. But the bottom line here, folks, is that the experts say the buck stops with BP. However, companies are going to try to deflect blame and point a lot of fingers. And these are all 6 companies that we're talking about here. And this is a look at their stock since April 20th, since the day of that explosion. They've all taken a drastic hit, and there's a long road ahead. It will be paved with many, many lawsuits. But this story is a lot bigger than BP, and these are the other companies that you need to know about.